I want to bring Jay Bilas into the conversation because he was also watching Last Dance, and he had this to say on trying to compare eras. All right, this is what he tweeted yesterday, and he tweeted it along with this image. MJ is the best ever. That's an enormous compliment given the greatness of others. Yet some say today's players wouldn't be dominant in the 80s or 90s. Not true. Or do we similarly believe the 80s and 90s players wouldn't be dominant in the 60s? Today's player is better than ever. Now just look at those numbers on your screen. Bill Russell won MVP in 1962 despite the fact that Wilt Chamberlain averaged 50 points and 25 rebounds. Look at Oscar Robertson's numbers. Look at Elgin Baylor's numbers, 38 points and 18 rebounds coming off the bench that year. So, Jay, this all started with a text you sent me right after the show in which you made it pretty clear you were not happy with some of the things you heard said here on Get Up yesterday, which I'm totally good with. I want to give you the floor. What is it about the generation of players today that you think people are missing?
Well, I think it's this romanticism of yesteryear in light of The Last Dance. Look, I loved every minute of The Last Dance, and I've loved every minute of the Michael Jordan retrospective. You know, I played against Jordan in college and thought he was amazing. Then and now, I think he's the greatest ever. But that's a profound compliment to say that you think someone's the best ever. It doesn't diminish who's second or third. Like, I'm saying Michael Jordan is better than Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. That's profound, given the greatness of Kareem. But this idea that somehow today's player would not be dominant back in the 80s or 90s because they could hand check back then or the game was different, I find that ludicrous. The idea that LeBron, Durant, Kawhi, Giannis, Doncic, Harden, Westbrook, Curry, you name it, Klay Thompson, they wouldn't be dominant back then. They might not have beaten Jordan's Bulls, but the players of the 80s took them to 7 games. And, Jordan and Pippen, those guys, they beat, I think it was 7 teams. They eliminated 7 teams that had won 60 or more games. They were great. But I don't ever hear any of these, similarly old men like me saying that, wait a minute now, the players of the 80s or 90s, they would have really struggled against the players of the 60s. And I kind of wonder, like, I'm a reverse get off my lawn guy here. I kind of wonder when this precipitous decline of skill and toughness started. Did it start in '99? Because I don't buy this. I think the players today are better than ever, and we do this only in basketball. I've never heard anybody say, "You think Patrick Mahomes could have got a pass past Ray Nitschke?" Or Mike Trout. You think he could have hit that crazy sidewinder stuff of Kent Tukulvi? Forget it. Simone Biles, you think she could have beaten Olga Korbut in her prime? We never say that nonsense. But we say it in basketball, and somehow we believe it because they could hand check back then. Now, that doesn't make any sense.
Let me throw a thought at you here. I do not think anyone, I for the most part, agree with the fact that we only tend to do this in basketball. I completely agree with you. The players of today are more skilled than ever before, and they avail themselves of things that are available to them today in the areas of technology and medicine and things like that, and that would make them greater athletes. But when Mark Jackson said they're cut from a different cloth, do you see that? Because you're around young people now. You're around college-level athletes and all that all the time. Do you think the mentality of the young people coming up in the sport today is similar to the mentality of young people coming up in the sport when you were one of them?
Yes, absolutely. I don't buy for 1 second that because Tom Brady was born in the 70s and that these current players in the NBA were born in the 70s or 80s, that somehow they don't know what competition is, and that all died out with players that were born in the 60s. That's nonsense. And it's similarly nonsense that somehow the players in the 80s or 90s weren't as tough-minded as the players who played in the 60s. Look, like the greatest generation ran up Omaha Beach. I have tremendous respect for that, but courage and greatness didn't die out when later generations came along. That just doesn't make any sense to me. The players today are competitive, and this is all in light of Michael Jordan being the greatest and watching that. Jordan's attitude and his drive, I think, are unmatched. but it doesn't mean those that were with him didn't have similar drive. It might not have been as good, or that his leader, like, you win and everything's justified. His leadership style is maybe questioned by some. I don't have any problem with it, and the fact is he won with it. But that doesn't mean that other leadership styles don't work as well and would not win. There have been a lot of championships won since then. Jordan's just the greatest, and that's a profound compliment. But the idea that today's player wouldn't be dominant back then is to me ludicrous.
I don't disagree with that. Guys, I'm going to keep it here because I want to stay on this conversation. Here's the difference, Jay, or a difference that I see. If you look back at the early part of Michael Jordan's career, when he was coming back from a bad injury and the team was begging him not to go out there and play, he was insisting on going out and playing. He played 82 games a year, each of the 3 seasons of their second three-peat. The notion that players today preserve themselves in the way that they do, the idea of rest and all that kind of stuff that we see in the sport today, that I think is one of the reasons people point to. If you told Michael Jordan that we're going to sit you out of this game because we're playing 3 games in 4 nights, which they don't even do anymore, by the way, I think that's where you might see some of the difference in mentality.
Well, I mean, some of the different, I don't think the mentality is any different. I honestly don't. I think these players play incredibly, but they're looking at a different landscape now. I mean, that's like saying back in the day, pitchers, like Tom Seaver never came out of a game for a reliever. He pitched complete games. And now Clayton Kershaw comes out after the 6th inning or the 7th inning. The game has changed, and the landscape has changed. You know, even back when MJ was injured, Jerry Reinsdorf and his team were looking out for their investment. And the investment back then was not as profound in a player as it is now. They put a 7-minute restriction on him. He fought against it and ultimately was allowed to play more. But you know, the idea that players aren't playing hurt now or they don't want to do it, I just don't buy that. I think they compete just as hard. I don't buy that somehow, you know, Tom Brady, because, you know, isn't as tough as Joe Montana because the rules are different and you can't hit him like you used to. I just don't buy that.